I'll introduce myself. Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon. My pronouns are they, them. And today we have the final session in this series of restorative yoga for long COVID. All of these asana and all of the breathwork or pranayama is meant to support folks who are dealing with long COVID and the various conditions associated with long COVID. Of course, this is not medical advice, but this is based on the science that we currently have. And another big part of this is that we want to encourage ourselves to rest, to relax, to take time. Because one thing that we do know is that the more that we are in a position where we have to force ourselves to move, to work during a COVID infection, the more likely we are to develop long COVID. So remembering that we need to set aside time and we need to be kind to ourselves is really kind of the backbone of restorative to begin with. So it lends itself very well towards supporting folks with long COVID or who are currently experiencing COVID itself. So we're going to start with a grounding, and then we'll move from our grounding into our pranayama or breath work. Today we have the option to be seated or reclined for our breath work as well. We'll be practicing Dirgha Pranayama or three-part breath or three-part wave, depending on what school of yoga you practice. But if you want to be reclined or semi-reclined, but maybe you have a hard time being fully reclined because of congestion, things like that, I want to offer this bolster setup. So here you can see I have one block on the highest position, one on the lowest position to create this L. And we're going to lean our bolster or bed pillows against that to create a ramp so that we're semi-inclined or semi-reclined. And if this feels a little high, you can take that higher block and turn it on its side and make it slightly lower. So you can dial up or dial down. If you don't have blocks, you can use throw pillows, bed pillows, anything you need to get this incline. And we just want to make sure that our spine is supported. So we would bring our bum against the base and recline back, making sure, again, our spine is supported. And then we can either stretch the legs out, or we can have a rolled blanket or bolster beneath the knees or pillow beneath the knees as well. Or we can lie flat directly against the ground in Savasana with maybe a bolster or pillow beneath the knees. I'm going to remain seated. You can sit cross-legged on your knees, whatever's comfortable. I like Baddha Konasana or butterfly, feet together, knees apart, because this allows me to bring the belly between the legs so that I have less pressure on the hips and so that I have more space to breathe. So once we find a position that works for us, we'll take a few moments, settle in. We might take a moment and notice our surroundings. We might notice any sounds in our space. I live in a city, so through your speakers, you might hear cars, sirens, people yelling. It happens. But we want to be aware of these sounds so that they don't shock us while we're resting. And if we're comfortable, we might bring a soft gaze, or we might gently close the eyes. And we might slowly dial in on the breath. So noticing the inhale and the exhale. We might take a few deep breaths, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth, if that's comfortable for us. Maybe releasing with a sigh or vocalization on the exhale. Letting go of the day, week, month so far. Allowing ourselves to fully arrive on the mat. We'll return to our natural breath, whatever that looks like for us. We might begin to notice the sensation of the body against the mat, against the props, against the floor, the bed. And we'll connect down through those objects, through the object, through the floor, all the way down to the earth, no matter how far beneath us the earth is today. Allowing ourselves to rest against the unconditional support that the earth provides. Allowing ourselves to be supported, to be held. Allowing ourselves to let go. The earth doesn't just connect us throughout to the natural world itself. It also connects us to our ancestors. It connects us through time. It connects us through space. No matter how far apart we are today, we are all resting upon the same earth. The same earth as our ancestors, the original stewards of the land. It connects us to the founders of the cultural and spiritual practices we still use today. All rested upon the same earth. All of these relationships, all of these ideas create a foundation on which we can learn, on which we can grow, and on which we can rest. And today we'll be inviting rest. We might notice any feelings that we want to rush, that we want to move on to the next thing. Without guilt, without shame, we'll acknowledge them when they come up. And see if we can let them fade into the background. Not trying to push them out of our heads, not feeling bad about wanting to move, but coexisting with it. And when we're ready, we'll come back to the breath. Noticing the inhale, the exhale. We might notice if we're breathing into the heart space or belly. No wrong answers, no judgment. We might notice if we're breathing in through the nose or the mouth. And we might notice where we feel the breath in the body. Do we feel the shoulders moving or the ribs expanding? Do we feel the heart space moving up and down, or maybe the belly? Again, no wrong answers. And when we're ready, we'll start to slowly alter the breath. So first, we'll see if it's comfortable for us, if we can breathe in and out through the nose. If we're dealing with congestion, or if this isn't accessible to us, that's okay. We can breathe in and out through the mouth as well. And when we're ready, we'll see if we can pull that breath down into the belly. So if we like, we might bring the hands to the belly and notice how that feels. We might notice the hands moving in and out with the breath. As we pull air into the diaphragm and release it. If we're reclined, we might also notice how this feels through the back body. Feeling the back of the low back pressing into the mat or against the props. If we like, we can move our hands towards the back to feel that expansion if we're seated. And then we'll see if after we breathe into the belly, if we pull in a bit more air, if we can feel the ribs expand. So maybe moving our hands to our sides. Pulling down into the belly, into the ribs, exhaling from the ribs and from the belly. Again, noticing the three-dimensional nature of the breath. How the ribs expand forward, out to the sides, and backward as well. And then we might bring the hands to the heart space. We'll expand into the belly, the ribs, and again, taking a bit more air, feel the heart space open. Exhale, releasing from the heart space, the ribs, and the belly. Again, noticing not just through the movement through the front, but maybe through the back, through the sides, under the arms. And finally, we might bring the fingers up towards the collarbones. And as we inhale, filling the belly, filling the ribs, filling the heart space all the way up to the shoulders. And releasing from the shoulders, the heart space, the ribs, and the belly. We'll continue this for about another minute on our own. Filling all the way up with air, exhaling, softening from the top down. Like a wave rolling in and sliding back out. And when we're ready, we'll release into our natural breath. We might bring a little bit of movement into the body, maybe rocking from front to back or side to side. If we're reclined, maybe bringing some movement into the fingers, the toes. maybe gently rolling onto the right or left side. And when we're ready, slowly making our way up to seated so we can set up for our first supported posture. So with our 3-part breath, we're going to be practicing this in our postures throughout. We know that this particular breath is really helpful for folks who are dealing with long COVID. We, number one, breathing in it through the nose helps produce nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator. Also can create reservoirs of nitric oxide in the sinuses, which may be helpful in actually reducing further infection. Science is there, not quite sure how much research, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And we're going to be practicing supported child's pose. If supported child's pose is not comfortable, I'll also be offering a second posture called Surfboard. So both of these will provide us with the ability to put a little bit of pressure on the front part of the body so that we are supported. And also it encourages the breath to fill the lungs. It provides space through the back of the body, and the back of the literal back, the back of the lungs as well, so that we can basically take up a bit more real estate with our lungs. So first we have a few variations for supported child's pose. If we like, we can have a bolster directly against the mat. And I'm going to set up on this side so y'all can see a bit better. So the first one, we can have the bolster directly against the ground. Some folks prefer to be raised a bit higher. So if we like, we can take our blocks and create a platform as well. This for me is more helpful than directly against the mat, but still is a little intense on the front body for me, because I am in a larger body. My thighs and my calves press together, which kind of pushes the load onto the front part of my body, which means that my shoulders, my neck, my head could take more of the strain. So I'm going to actually make the platform that we just saw. If we have any sort of issues with the knees, we can place a blanket down. We can also grab this blanket. We can also take one of our blankets and roll this. And this can go underneath the ankles, so that when we come down into our posture, I'm going to open this up actually. Especially if you deal with like plantar fasciitis, it allows us to keep the bend. Allows us to keep the bend in the ankle, so the foot isn't flat. So I'm going to bring my ramp back exactly the same way that we set up at the beginning of the class. And then I'm going to bring my legs to either side. So my knees are open. And then we can come down to tabletop, no matter how the bolster is set up. And we're going to allow ourselves to rest against the bolster. We can rest on a cheek. If that doesn't feel comfortable, we can keep the head straight. Anything that feels good here. We can hug our bolster. We can bring our hands to our sides. Whatever feels comfortable here. This is our supported child. If this does not feel comfortable, if it's maybe too much pressure on the knees, I also want to offer Surfboard. So for Surfboard, we can take our bolster or our stack of blankets, and we're going to support ourselves from about the ribs up. We want to make sure that the belly has space to expand. So we might let it come a little bit further down. I'm going to leave my blanket here, but I am going to push my roll down so that it still stays under my ankles. And if you're like me, maybe your chest is a little bit larger, grab another blanket or pillow to place beneath the head. I'm going to push my roll down so it's beneath my ankles. So we have lots of options here. Once we find the one that we feel comfortable in, I still need this right now. We'll take a few deep breaths. Maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Allowing ourselves to rest against the support of the props, the support of the earth. And then we'll come back to our 3-part wave breath. So bringing the breath in and out through the nose if we aren't there already, and if that's comfortable for us. Pulling the breath down into the diaphragm, the ribs, the heart space, the shoulders, and on the exhale, releasing from the heart space, releasing from the ribs, releasing from the belly. Again, inhaling. Continuing to breathe. And we'll notice the expansion through the back body. So whereas previously we might have noticed the belly expanding forward, we might begin to notice the expansion through the back body. So maybe noticing through the low back, the hips, the ribs, between the shoulder blades. Exhale, draining from the shoulder blades, the ribs, and the low back. We'll be here for the next 4 minutes or so. If we like, we can rest on the opposite cheek to bring a bit of balance to the neck. And when we're ready, we might bring the hands down to either side of the bolster beneath the shoulders if we're not there already. We'll find our natural breath and then slowly begin to press up through tabletop, making our way into a seated position as we set up for the next posture. If we are in the surfboard and coming onto our knees isn't comfortable, then we might roll off to the right or left side and press up from there. For our next posture, we're going to be coming into a posture called Mountain Brook. It's a variation on fish. And for this, we'll be using a rolled blanket and possibly a bolster or a few pillows. And we may also want a pillow for under the head or a blanket for under the head. So if we like, we can take our bolster or one of our pillows, and that's going to go just south of the center of the mat. This is going to support under our legs. If we like, we can also have our eye pillow handy or a blanket that we can pull over the head to cover the eyes, just to help us come into a deeper state of relaxation. I'm going to take one of my blankets, fold it into a small square to use as a pillow for under the head. If you like, you can also roll the edge of the blanket, and then this part, the rolled part, can go under the neck. The head can rest on the soft bit. That's really up to you, whatever feels comfortable there. And then we're going to take one of our blankets. I'm going to go for one of my thicker blankets. But start small if you haven't come into this style of heart opener. So this is going to be rolled into a small bolster. And this is going to go beneath the shoulder blades. So if our shoulder blades kind of curve out like this, they're going to go right underneath the base. So it's going to go along the width of the mat. And there's a bit of eyeballing involved here until you've done it a few times and you know kind of where you need to set up for your body. So I have everything set up here. Eye pillow is within reach if you'd like to use it. And then I'm going to swing the legs over the bolster, or I like to place the bolster and then lift the legs. And then recline backwards. We're going to make sure that we have that placement of the roll under the shoulder blades. And if we're using the rolled blanket under the head, again, we want the rolled portion under the neck. And this is optional. So if you like, you can have the head directly against the mat. And if after a few moments you feel like you need to adjust the blanket roll, please do. If you need to kind of kick your bolster or pillow to the correct spot under your knees. And what we're doing here is we're allowing the heart space to open. We're allowing a stretch through the lower abdomen. And we have a soft inversion because we're bringing the heart space above the head. And the arms can come out to the sides, or we can have the hands against the body, anything that feels comfortable here. If you want a bit more heart opening, you can bring the arms into cactus on either side. Or we can have the arms as if we're in Savasana, kind of coming out towards the edges of the body. So once we've found our position, we'll again take a few deep breaths, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth if that's helpful. And we can release here. Maybe welcoming back our 3-part breath, pulling down into the belly, the ribs, the heart space, releasing from the heart space, the ribs, and the belly. If we're comfortable here, we can feel free to stay here. But if we like, we might slowly begin to roll off to the right or left side. We might reach behind us, remove our bolster or our rolled blanket, setting it off to the side. And then we can roll back onto the back for a comfortable Shavasana with our bolster or blanket or pillow beneath the knees. We can adjust our head pillow however is comfortable. We just want to make sure that the shoulders are against the mat itself. We also have the option to come into constructed rest here, where we place the soles of the feet against the ground, maybe moving the feet towards the edges of the mat, resting the knees towards each other. Or if we prefer to be semi-reclined, we can bring our platform back with our blocks and our bolster, much like we had at the beginning of the session. For our Shavasana, we'll take a few moments here, allowing ourselves to find a position where we're comfortable. We might breathe in and out through the nose again. Again, if that's comfortable. Noticing the inhale and the exhale. Allowing ourselves to rest against the support of the mat, the props, the earth. And we'll take a moment to come through a body scan. So we'll start by noticing the feet. And we're not necessarily trying to cultivate anything here as much as just notice what we're experiencing in the moment, whether it's tingling or the difference in temperature between our body and the air around us. We might notice the feel of fabric if we're wearing socks, or we might recognize that we don't feel anything at all. There's no judgment, there's no attachment. We're witnessing. So maybe again, noticing from the toes to the heel. Maybe noticing the top of the foot and the ankle. On our exhale, releasing the feet and moving into the lower portion of the leg. We might notice the calves or the backs of the legs. We might notice the shins or the tops of the legs. On our exhale, releasing and moving into the knee joint itself, noticing the inside and the outside. Releasing and moving into the thighs. We might notice the quads or the tops of the thighs. We might notice the hamstrings or backs. The inner line, the outer line. On our exhale, releasing, moving into the pelvis, hips, and bum. On our exhale, releasing, moving into the torso, noticing the belly and low back. We might notice any movement here. sensation. Releasing, moving upward into the ribs and heart space. Releasing and moving into the shoulders, the shoulder blades. Letting go. Moving into the arms, from the shoulder to the elbow, from the elbow to the wrist, from the wrist to the fingertips, noticing the back of the hand, the fingers, the thumb, and noticing the palms of the hands. Maybe allowing ourselves to invite softness into this space before releasing. Moving into the neck and throat. Moving upward into the base of the head. First noticing the back of the head, up through the hair, towards the crown. Maybe wrapping around the sides of the head, noticing the ears. Moving into the face, noticing the jaw, the lips, the cheeks, nose, eyelids, eyebrows, the forehead, all the way up to the crown of the head. Taking a moment and noticing the whole body. And on the exhale, letting go. Allowing ourselves to find rest in this moment. Reminding ourselves that we are not our thoughts. We are not the expectations we have for ourselves or the expectations that others have for us. We are not our production. When we let go of what we are not, we find space to breathe. And we find space to simply be. We'll be here in this space for the next few moments. Excuse me. If we like, we of course can stay where we are. But if we'd rather, we might slowly begin to bring movement into the fingers, the toes, the head and neck. We can take any intuitive movement that feels good. If we're reclined, we might gently roll onto the right or left side. Maybe slowly blink the eyes open. And when we're ready, come up to a seated position if we choose. From wherever we are. If we like, we can bring the hands to heart center or place them anywhere against the body that feels good. And we'll take 3 breaths together in a way that feels comfortable for us. We'll take a moment to thank ourselves for making space for rest and breath. And I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your practice with me today.